The room was dark, cold, and heavy with silence. On the stone floor lay a young girl, her wrists locked in iron chains. Every night she was dragged into the chamber and forced to stay close to the alien masters, her body used not for love or kindness but only for warmth. They called her a bed warmer, a tool, not a person. She was never asked if she felt pain, never asked if she was tired, never asked if she dreamed. Her life was a cycle of cold mornings and cruel nights. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw were the walls of stone, covered in frost and shadow. Her body trembled from weakness. But she had learned not to cry. Crying brought punishment. Crying reminded them that she was human, and they hated the thought that humans could feel. So she stayed silent, her chains heavy, her breath thin. The aliens who owned her were tall and pale, their eyes sharp like knives to them. She was less than an animal. They gave her scraps of food, just enough to keep her alive. At night, she was thrown beside them, and in the day she was locked away. She had forgotten how the sun felt, how fresh air smelled. Years had passed in this frozen prison, but her mind still whispered one word: freedom. Sometimes, when the masters spoke among themselves, she heard fragments of stories of distant stars, of humans sold in markets, of broken lives scattered across the galaxy. She knew she was not the only one. There were others like her, slaves, prisoners, victims of cruelty, hidden in the dark corners of alien worlds. The thought made her chest heavy, yet it also gave her strength. If others could survive, maybe she could too. At night, when her eyes were open and the world around her was asleep, she thought of the past. She remembered warm hands that once held her when she was a child. She remembered laughter, the sound of birds, and the comfort of home. But those memories felt like dreams now, slipping further away each day. Her name, her real name, was something she dared not speak. The aliens had taken even that from her, calling her only bed warmer. Still inside, she whispered it to herself, afraid it would vanish if she forgot. The silence of the chamber was heavy, broken only by the sound of chains dragging against stone. Sometimes when she tried to shift her position, the iron links cut into her skin. Scars lined her wrists and ankles, each one telling the story of nights she wished would end. But no one came, no one helped. To the universe outside this cold prison, she did not exist, and yet there was something inside her that refused to die. It was small, fragile, but real, a flame that whispered that one day, somehow, this would end. Her eyes, though tired, still held that spark. She clung to it every time the pain grew too much, every time her heart told her to give up. One night, as the chamber lay in silence, she heard something unusual. At first, she thought it was only the wind pressing against the walls, but then, faintly, she heard footsteps. They were different from the heavy, cold steps of the aliens. These footsteps carried hesitation, caution, and something else, something almost human. Her heart beat faster. She raised her head, straining to listen. The sound grew closer, then stopped. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a voice, soft, low, almost like a whisper, slipped through the shadows. It was not cruel, not harsh. It was gentle. And for the first time in years, she heard a voice that sounded alive. Her breath caught in her throat. Was it a dream? Was her mind creating illusions because it could no longer bear the silence? She pressed her back against the wall, her chains rattling, her body trembling. But the voice came again, closer this time, a single word, carried in the darkness. It was not her name, not the cruel title they gave her, but it was something she had longed to hear for so long. It was the sound of care, the sound of someone who saw her as more than a thing. Her eyes widened, and her heart pounded. The chamber no longer felt as silent as before. The chains still held her, but for the first time, they did not feel unbreakable. She held her breath, waiting, wondering. Somewhere deep inside, hope stirred, fragile but alive. The night was not like other nights. Something was about to change. Asterisk. The night stretched long, heavy and endless in the chamber of stone. The girl lay curled against the cold floor, her thin body trembling. Her chains were still locked tight, biting into her skin. Every breath she took was shallow. A whisper of life that refused to end. For years, this was her world. The aliens used her only when they wanted warmth, tossing her aside when the light of morning came. They saw her not as a person but as a tool, a living object with no voice, no rights, no freedom when she closed her eyes. The nightmares were worse than the reality. In dreams, she heard laughter of her masters, saw shadows pulling her deeper into darkness, and when she woke, the darkness was still there. The cold nights broke her body, but her spirit fought quietly. She counted the days by scratches on the wall, small marks hidden beneath her chains. She whispered stories to herself. Simple tales of freedom, of skies filled with stars. Stories where she was not chained, not broken, not used. Her mind built a world inside the darkness, and that world kept her alive. Sometimes, she wondered why the aliens kept her at all. Why not kill her and end it? But she knew the answer. She was useful to them, not loved, not wanted, but useful. Her life continued because her suffering served their comfort. That truth burned deeper than the chains. When the masters left the chamber, silence became her only companion, silence so heavy it pressed against her ears until she thought she would scream. But she did not scream. She had learned that screaming only brought pain. Instead, she learned to listen to the cracks in the walls, to the footsteps outside, to every shift in the air. The silence was cruel, but in it she found clues. Clues that the world outside her prison was not completely dead. And one night, she heard them again, those strange footsteps, soft and human. The first time she thought it was a dream. But now she was certain. There was someone out there, moving with care, hiding in the shadows. Every step made her heart pound faster. Every pause filled her chest with both hope and fear. Could it be another prisoner? Could it be a trick? A cruel game by the masters? She did not know, but the sound of those steps gave her something she had not felt in years: anticipation. She found herself waiting, holding her breath as the chamber darkened around her. The next morning, her masters returned. They dragged her closer, their cold hands careless and harsh. The girl's body shivered, but not only from the chill. Her mind was awake now, more alert than ever. As she endured their cruelty, she thought only of the footsteps, of the possibility that someone, somewhere might be watching. The thought gave her strength, hidden behind her silence. That night, after they left her chained and weak, she pressed her ear to the stone wall. The air on the other side whispered faintly, carrying sound. She waited for hours, her body stiff, her skin raw, and then it came, the soft sound again. Closer, slower, but real, her eyes filled with tears. She had long hidden, not of weakness, but of something stronger, hope. The steps stopped, and silence followed. Her heart ached with the waiting. She wanted to call out, but fear held her back. What if it was a trick? What if it was the masters? Her lips trembled, but she stayed quiet. Only her eyes spoke, wide and desperate in the shadows. Another sound reached her, a faint tap, like a hand against stone. She froze, her breath caught. The tap came again, gentle, patient, as if telling her she was not alone. Her chains rattled softly when she moved, and for the first time she dared to answer. She let the metal links scrape the stone, just once, just enough, and then she waited, heart racing. From the other side, another tap answered. Her chest tightened, her whole body shaking. It was not her masters, not their cruelty. This was different. Someone was there, someone alive, someone who heard her. Her silent prison was no longer as empty as before. The footsteps faded after that, and the chamber grew quiet again. But the silence had changed. Now, hidden within it, was a secret connection. A thread of sound that tied her to the unknown. She lay down on the cold floor, her chains heavy, but her mind alive. For the first time in years, the night did not feel endless. It was still dark, still cruel, but inside her burned a fragile flame, a flame lit by soft footsteps and a gentle tap. Something was coming, something was changing, and in her heart, she held on to that single truth. The cold nights would not last forever. Asterisk, asterisk. The chamber was silent again, but her heart was not. It beat faster each night as she waited, listening for those secret footsteps. The girl had lived for years in chains, in cold nights and darker days, but now something had changed inside her. She no longer counted only scars or marks on the wall. She counted the moments until the sound returned. On the fourth night, she heard it again, the soft steps, careful but steady, drawing closer to her prison. Her breath caught as the shadows deepened, her ears strained. Her chains rattled softly when she moved. And then it happened, the faintest crack of light appeared through the stone door, a sliver wide enough for her to see. Through that sliver, she saw him, not pale and sharp-eyed like her masters, not cruel or cold. He was human, like her. His face was lined with weariness, his clothes torn, but his eyes, those eyes were different. They carried something she had not seen in years. Compassion. For a long moment, she did not believe it. Her mind whispered that it was a trick, another test. But when his gaze met hers, the world shifted. The girl, broken by silence and cruelty, felt her chest ache with something new. It was not fear, not pain, it was recognition. He saw her, not as a tool, not as a bed warmer, but as a person. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. The chains were heavy. Her voice was lost from years of silence, yet her eyes spoke for her, wide, desperate, filled with questions. Who are you? Why are you here? Can you save me? And in his gaze, she thought she saw the answer. Yes. The man stepped closer, careful not to draw attention. He glanced behind him, fear flashing in his eyes, then back at her. His lips moved, shaping words without sound. She could not hear them, but she understood. He was speaking to her, telling her to wait, to hold on. Her heart pounded as tears stung her eyes. No one had ever told her to hold on before. When the light from the crack vanished and the footsteps faded, the chamber felt empty again. But this emptiness was different. It was filled with a promise. The girl lay against the stone floor, chains still biting, body still weak, but in her mind, she repeated the memory of those eyes, eyes that carried warmth, eyes that carried risk, eyes that carried hope. The next night, she waited again. Every moment stretched long and painful, but she stayed awake. Her masters dragged her into their chamber and used her as always. Their cold hands and harsh laughter burned into her skin, but she thought only of the stranger. She thought of his face, the way he had looked at her, not like an object but like a soul, and that thought gave her the strength to survive another night. When darkness fell again, he returned. This time, he pressed closer to the crack in the wall. His voice was low, barely a whisper, but clear enough for her to hear. "I see you," he said. Her heart stopped, her breath caught. Those 3 words broke the silence of years. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in forever, tears rolled freely down her cheeks. Not of pain, but of being seen. He looked around nervously before speaking again. "You are not alone," he whispered. The chains rattled as she shifted, her weak arms straining to move closer. Her lips parted, but no sound came, only a cracked whisper of breath. He nodded anyway, as if he had heard her, as if he understood without words. The girl studied him in silence, every detail burning into her memory. His hair was unkempt, his face worn, his hands rough from labor. He was not free either, she realized. The marks on his arms told her he too was a prisoner. Yet somehow, he still carried that fire in his gaze, a fire that said he had not surrendered. For hours, they stayed like that, 2 broken souls on either side of stone. No chains could silence the bond forming in that darkness. Every glance, every whisper was a rebellion against the cruelty around them. She had lived years in silence, but now her silence was filled with meaning. Her masters still thought she was alone, but she was not. She had been seen, And that changed everything when he finally stepped back. His eyes lingered on hers. His hand pressed lightly against the wall, as if promising he would return. Then the footsteps faded again, swallowed by the night. The girl curled against the stone floor, her chains rattling softly. But for the first time, she smiled, a small, trembling smile, because now she knew the truth. The cold nights were not endless, her prison was not unbreakable, and somewhere beyond the chains, a stranger's eyes had already begun to change her fate. ****. The chamber was still, the air heavy with silence. The girl lay in her chains, but her mind no longer drifted in emptiness. She replayed the memory of the stranger's eyes. The way he had whispered, "I see you," those words echoed louder than the clinking of metal, louder than the footsteps of her masters. For the first time in years, she felt alive. The next night, she waited, her body tense with hope and fear. Would he return? Or had it been only a cruel trick of her imagination? Every sound in the hallway made her heart race, and then, soft and careful, she heard the steps again. Her chest tightened as the faint crack of light appeared at the door. He was there. His face appeared through the shadow, tired yet determined. This time, he spoke clearly, though his voice was low. "My name is Daniel," he whispered. The name felt strange in the chamber, a sound she had not heard in so long. It was like a key, turning in a lock deep inside her heart. He looked at her with a steady gaze, then added, "I will not leave you here." Her eyes widened, her breath catching. The chains rattled as she shifted closer, desperate to believe. For years she had lived in silence. Now here was a man who promised something impossible: freedom. She wanted to speak, to answer, but her voice was broken. Only a faint whisper left her lips. "Why?" Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes flickering with anger, not at her, but at the cruelty she had suffered. "Because you are human," he whispered back. "Because you deserve more than this." His words sank deep into her chest, breaking the wall of despair she had built over years. Tears stung her eyes as she lowered her head, ashamed of her weakness. But Daniel's voice remained steady. "I will find a way," he said, "even if it kills me." The promise hung in the air like fire. It was reckless, dangerous, and yet it lit a spark inside her heart. For so long, she had dreamed of escape, only to crush those dreams in silence. Now someone else dreamed it with her, the thought made her body tremble, not with fear, but with hope she could barely contain. Their moments together were brief, stolen in the shadows of night. Each night, Daniel returned, and each time he whispered more. He told her he had been captured months ago, taken from a mining ship. He was forced to work for the aliens, building their machines, but he had learned the paths of the tunnels, the weakness of the guards. Slowly, he had been planning, waiting for the right chance, and now with her, he had a reason to risk it all. The girl listened in silence, her heart pounding with every word. She had no strength, no weapons, no freedom. But she had him, and that was more than she had ever imagined. Daniel leaned close one night, his hand pressed lightly against the wall. "I will come for you," he whispered. "Soon, when the time is right, we will leave this place together." Her chains rattled softly as her lips trembled. The word formed, broken but clear. "Promise?" Daniel's eyes met hers, steady and unshaken. "I promise," he said. It was simple, but it was everything. A promise in the dark. A fragile thread binding two souls against a world that wanted them broken. The days dragged on painfully slow. Her masters still used her, still treated her like nothing. But now, she endured with her eyes fixed on the thought of escape. Every cruel hand, every cold night, was met with the memory of Daniel's words. She was no longer only a bed warmer, she was someone waiting for freedom. One night, Daniel slipped her a small piece of cloth through the crack. It was torn, dirty, but to her it was treasure. She held it close, breathing in the faint scent of earth and sweat. It was proof that she was not alone. It was proof that his promise was real. But danger was everywhere. Guards patrolled more often. suspicious of whispers in the dark. One wrong sound, one wrong step, and Daniel would be killed. The girl's heart ached every time he left, fearing he would not return. Yet every night he came back, eyes burning with determination. Each visit was a risk, but neither of them could stop. They needed each other, and so the risky promise lived between them. In the silence of chains, in the darkness of nights, she no longer prayed for freedom. Alone she waited for it with him. Her heart beat with a fragile strength, whispering to itself, "Hold on," he promised. "Hold on, he will come." The cold nights were still long, her body still weak, but her soul was no longer silent. It carried his promise like a flame that would burn until the day the chains broke, and deep in her heart, she knew that day was coming. The nights had grown heavier, the silence sharper. Each passing hour felt like a test of patience, of survival, but inside the girl's heart, the promise of freedom still burned. Daniel had whispered it again and again, "I will come for you." And tonight, she felt it in her bones. Something was different. The air was colder, the halls outside quieter. Her masters had left earlier than usual, their heavy footsteps fading into the distance. The girl lay in her chains, waiting, her breath shallow, her body trembling with both fear and hope. Every sound echoed louder in the silence. And then, at last, the soft steps returned. The crack of light appeared at the stone door. Daniel's face showed through, his eyes hard with determination. This time, he carried something in his hands, a piece of bent metal. Sharp at the edge, her heart jumped, chains rattling softly as she pushed herself closer. Daniel crouched low, his voice barely a whisper. "Tonight," he said. Her chest tightened, her pulse racing. The word filled the chamber with fire. Daniel slipped through the narrow opening. For the first time, he stood inside her prison, close enough for her to see every scar on his face. He knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he pressed the metal tool to her chains. The sound was sharp, metal grinding against metal. She held her breath, every second stretching into eternity. Would the guards hear? Would her masters return? The shackle on her wrist gave way with a faint snap. Pain shot through her arm as blood rushed back into stiff flesh. She gasped but forced herself silent, her eyes wide with disbelief. Daniel's hand moved to her other wrist, his jaw tight with focus. "You're coming with me," he whispered. The chains gave way one by one until they fell to the ground in a soft clatter. The girl stared at her bare wrists, at the marks of years that bound her. She touched the scars, trembling. She was free at least from the chains. Daniel pulled her gently to her feet. Her legs shook, weak from years of stillness. She stumbled, but his arm caught her. Strong and steady, her eyes met his, and he gave her a small nod. "We move in silence," he said. She nodded back, too stunned for words. They slipped through the door into the hallway. The walls stretched long, lit faintly by torches that flickered with pale flame. The sound of their footsteps echoed faintly. Every step a risk. Daniel moved carefully, leading her through narrow passages. He knew the paths well. His time as a laborer had taught him where the guards patrolled. Still, danger lurked in every corner. At one turn, they froze, pressed against the wall as a guard passed by. The alien shadow loomed long and sharp, its heavy steps shaking the ground. The girl held her breath, her body shaking against Daniel's arm. The guard paused, sniffing the air. Her heart thundered in her chest, certain he would hear. But after a moment, the creature moved on, its footsteps fading. She exhaled shakily, her knees weak. Daniel whispered, "Almost there." His voice steadied her, pulling her back from panic. They moved again, slipping down another corridor, this one darker, colder. The girl stumbled, her bare feet scraping against the stone. But Daniel pulled her forward, refusing to let go. She leaned on him, each step a battle, but she kept going. Finally, they reached a large iron door. Daniel pressed his ear against it, then pushed it open slowly. Beyond was the outside world, black sky stretching wide, stars glimmering faintly. The girl's breath caught in her throat, tears burning her eyes. She had not seen the sky in years. The cold night air bit her skin, but it felt like freedom. Her chains were gone, the walls behind her fading, and above her, the universe opened wide, but freedom was not yet safe. A cry rang out behind them, the harsh, sharp voice of a guard. The doors slammed open, and the sound of heavy steps filled the air. The girl gasped, fear flooding her chest. Daniel grabbed her hand, pulling her into the shadows. "Run," he whispered fiercely. Her legs screamed in pain, her body weak, but she forced herself forward. The ground was rough beneath her feet, but she did not stop. The sound of pursuit grew louder, shouts, claws striking stone. The aliens had discovered their escape, and they would not let them go easily. Daniel pulled her toward a narrow tunnel carved into the cliffs. "Here," he said, his voice steady despite the danger. They slipped inside just as the guards reached the clearing. The tunnel was dark, the air damp and heavy. The girl clung to Daniel's hand, her heart racing for the first time. The fear of being caught was mixed with something else, the thrill of running toward freedom. Behind them, the shouts echoed, growing closer, but Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. Strong and certain, "We will make it," he said, and though her body trembled, she believed him. For in the shadows of the night, her chains broken and her heart awake, she was no longer only a prisoner. She was someone escaping, someone fighting, someone alive, asterisk, asterisk. The tunnel walls shook with the sound of pursuit. The girl stumbled as Daniel pulled her forward, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. Behind them, the voices of the guards rose louder, harsh and filled with rage. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. Her chest burned with every breath, her body weak from years in chains. Each step felt like fire tearing through her legs, but Daniel's grip on her hand was strong, unyielding. "Keep moving," he whispered. His voice was steady, and it gave her the strength to push forward. The tunnel twisted sharply, leading into a cavern lit by strange alien torches. The light flickered against the stone, casting long shadows that danced on the walls. Daniel slowed, scanning the space quickly. "There's another way out," he muttered, pointing toward a narrow path at the far end. But before they could move, a sound froze them in place. A growl, low and rumbling, echoed through the cavern. From the darkness stepped one of the alien masters. Its pale skin glistened in the dim light, its eyes burning with fury. It carried a weapon, jagged and cruel, glowing faintly with energy. The girl's breath caught, her body trembling. Daniel pushed her behind him, his stance hardening. The alien spoke, its voice sharp like broken glass. "You dare run?" It hissed. The girl lowered her head, fear rising like a storm. But Daniel stood tall, his eyes blazing. "She is not yours," he said, his voice steady. "She is not a thing," the alien snarled, stepping forward. The cavern shook as it raised. The weapon. Daniel moved fast, grabbing a broken piece of stone from the ground. The girl gasped as the two collided, human against alien, stone against steel. The clash echoed like thunder. Daniel fought with everything he had, his movements sharp and desperate. The alien was stronger, faster, but Daniel had something the creature did not. He had purpose. Every strike, every block was fueled by his promise. The girl watched with wide eyes, her heart racing. She wanted to scream, to help, but her body was too weak. The alien's weapon slashed across Daniel's arm, leaving a burning wound. He cried out but did not fall. Instead, he used the pain, striking harder, faster. The stone in his hand shattered against the alien's jaw. The creature roared in rage, stumbling back. "Run!" Daniel shouted, but the girl did not move. Her legs trembled, her heart torn between fear and loyalty. She could not leave him, not after he had come for her. Instead, she grabbed a smaller stone from the ground, her weak hands shaking. Her body screamed in protest, but she lifted it high. When the alien lunged again, she threw the stone with all the strength left in her. It struck the creature's eye, making it howl in fury. Daniel seized the chance. driving his weight into the alien and forcing it against the cavern wall. The fight was brutal, every sound sharp and violent. Finally, with a desperate shove, Daniel sent the creature crashing into the ground. It lay still, its weapon clattering. Beside it, the girl gasped, her body shaking. Daniel stumbled, his arm bleeding, his breath ragged, but he reached for her hand again, his grip unbroken. "Move," he said firmly. "We don't have long." They rushed toward the narrow path, their footsteps quick and uneven. The air grew colder as the tunnel sloped upward. Ahead, a faint light glimmered, the promise of escape. But the shouts behind them had not faded. The guards were still coming, louder and closer. The girl's chest tightened with fear. Would they ever be free? Daniel pulled her harder, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes still burning. "You're almost there," he whispered. Her legs stumbled, but she forced herself forward. Step by step, every scar, every wound, every cold night had led to this moment. She could not stop now. At the end of the tunnel, the ground opened into a cliffside. The night sky spread wide, filled with stars and the silver glow of a distant moon. The girl froze, overwhelmed by the sight. It was beautiful, endless, for the first time in years. She felt the true breath of freedom. But the moment shattered as a guard's roar echoed behind them. Dozens of shadows poured into the tunnel, their weapons glowing. The girl's eyes widened. In terror, Daniel stepped in front of her once again, his fists clenched. His body was weak, but his spirit burned like fire. "They will not take you back," he said, his voice like steel. She clung to his arm, tears running down her face. The guards advanced, their steps shaking the ground. The night air grew heavy with danger. This was the edge, the line between freedom and capture, and Daniel stood ready to fight it. The girl's heart pounded as she whispered, "Please don't let go." Daniel turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. "I won't," he promised. "Not tonight, not ever." The guards charged, the air filled with fire and fury, and the battle for freedom began. The night sky stretched wide above the cliff, stars burning like silver fire. The girl stood trembling, her body weak but her spirit alive. Behind her, the tunnel roared with fury as the guards poured forward, their weapons glowing with cold light. Daniel stood in front of her, blood dripping from his wounded arm, his stance firm, his eyes sharp. He was only one man, and yet he stood as though the entire world depended on him. The first guard lunged, its weapon slicing through the air. Daniel moved fast, grabbing the alien's arm and twisting it with all his strength. The weapon clattered to the ground, sparks flying. The girl gasped, stepping back as the other guards closed in. The air shook with shouts and the clash of steel against stone. Daniel fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Every punch, every strike was fueled by the promise he had made, the promise to free her, but he was outnumbered. His wounds deep, his body slowing. The girl's chest tightened with fear. If he fell, everything would end here, on the edge of the world. Her eyes darted to the weapon on the ground. Her hands shook as she bent and lifted it, the weight heavy and unfamiliar. Her body screamed in pain, but her heart screamed louder. She could not watch him fight alone. For years she had been silent, chained, powerless, but not tonight. Tonight she was free, and freedom meant she could fight back. She raised the weapon, its glow lighting her pale face. The nearest guard turned toward her, sneering at the sight of a broken human holding their weapon. But before it could strike, she pulled the trigger. A flash of light burst forward, striking the creature in the chest. It fell with a roar, smoke rising from its body. Daniel turned, his eyes wide with shock and pride. The girl's breath came heavy, her arms shaking. But for the first time, she felt strong, no longer just a prisoner, no longer just a bed warmer. She was fighting for her life. Together, side by side, they faced the guards. Daniel's fists and the girl's stolen weapon struck again and again. The cavern filled with the sound of battle, of chains breaking, of lives refusing to be stolen. One by one, the guards fell until silence returned, a heavy, Trembling silence, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. Daniel dropped to one knee, blood running down his arm. The girl rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. "You kept your promise," she whispered, her voice cracking. Daniel looked at her, his lips curling into a faint smile. "I told you," he said softly. "I won't let go." Together, they stumbled toward the edge of the cliff. The wind rushed against their faces, cold but fresh, alive below. The land stretched wide and wild, forests and rivers glimmering under the starlight. It was dangerous, unknown, but it was freedom. The girl's chest swelled with emotion as she stepped forward, her bare feet pressing into the earth. For the first time in years, she felt the ground without chains, without command. She raised her face to the sky, and tears fell freely. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "I am human." Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You are free," he said. The words wrapped around her like warmth, stronger than any fire. For so long, she had been treated as nothing, but now she knew the truth. She was more than what they had called her, more than what they had taken from her. She was alive, and her life was her own. The first light of dawn crept across the horizon. Golden rays stretched over the mountains, painting the sky in fire. The girl watched in silence, her eyes wide, her heart beating fast. The sun, which she had not seen for years, rose again. It was as if the universe itself had promised her a new beginning. Daniel stood beside her, his face pale from pain but his spirit unbroken. Together they looked at the rising sun, the promise of tomorrow glowing brighter than the scars of yesterday. The girl reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. For a moment, neither spoke. There was no need. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was full, alive, a silence of peace. Far behind them, the ruins of the alien prison still smoked. Others were still trapped in places like that, still suffering as she had. Her heart ached for them. But she also knew something else. Her story was not over. Her survival was not only for herself, it was for all who had been forgotten. She turned to Daniel, her eyes burning with a new fire. "We will fight for them," she whispered. He looked at her, weary but proud, and nodded. "Yes," he said, "we will." The girl looked back at the dawn, the chains of her past left, broken behind her. Each ray of sunlight felt like a promise that she was not only free, but stronger than she had ever been. The bed warmer was gone. In her place stood a survivor, a fighter, a human. And as the new day rose, she walked forward. Not into darkness, not into silence, but into freedom, into hope, into the dawn of a life truly her own. Asterisk, asterisk.